December 15th, Vrosliker. What small victory we'd had last night was squashed the next day. Arnar woke me up that morning to let me know that another sheep had gone missing. "One of Gertrude's 3 lambs. She is beside herself with grief," he said, and I could tell that the old farmer was as distraught as the ewe was. "The cows are hurt again. Both are injured, and their udders are so bruised that I don't dare to touch them. Doesn't matter anyway. Their milk is gone when I arrived." I shook my head. This isn't normal behavior from the lads. I remembered last year and wishing I'd paid more attention. The last few years had seen sheep and milk and things go missing, but never quite to this amount. I'd never actually believed in the Yule lads, no more than I'd believed in Father Christmas since I was small. But now that I'd seen them, it was harder to deny that they existed. Arnar nodded. "They take sheep sometimes. They take some milk, but this is not their usual trickery. Something is different this year. I don't like it. Did you have any trouble last night?" I nodded, but Grendel scared them off. Arnar snorted. "I still can't believe you got some use out of that angry little thing." "He really seems to like Davin. He's the only one I've ever seen who could pet him without getting scratched." Arnar smiled. "Then your brother is more than welcome to him. My Yule gift to him." I smiled, but Arnar laughed when he saw my trepidation. "Thanks so much. He's an angry one, to be certain, but he's a better mouser than any. He caught 10 fat rats in the barn on his own just last week. He'll be a good pet, once he's used to you, of course." He asked me if I could stay with the sheep that night, and I agreed that I would, confident in our new guardian and his ability to protect the house. That night, Grendel's skills would be put to the test. I came back inside and started making inroads on lunch, thinking that sandwiches might be the way to go. I remembered too late that Ulf had raided my pantry before Stuffer could, and made a list of things to get from the store. Davin came out about that time, rubbing his eyes and holding his new shadow. Grendel looked at me like I was the stupidest thing he'd ever seen, but he didn't hiss at me. When I reached to pet him, he swiped at me, but his claws were in, and the swipe was lame. We were brothers in battle now, I supposed, but he still didn't care much for me. "Good morning. Any plans today?" Davin said, yawning. "I've got work tonight. Did Ulf have some chores for you?" "He said something about fixing a chicken coop this afternoon, but told me I didn't have to come till after lunch." "Sounds like you got some time for shopping with me then, but let's get some breakfast first." I opened the pot cabinet and grimaced when I saw that several of my pans were missing. I glowered at Grendel, seeing that Stuffer had come back after our little skirmish. The cat seemed to shrug as if to say, "Well, I had to sleep sometime, didn't I?" I didn't have more than a couple of pans to start with, but the loss was felt pretty widely when I couldn't make eggs or bacon without using the only pan I had left. It was huge, big enough to cook half a chicken in, and I set it on the stove and opened the utensil drawer to get a spatula. I pulled my hand back in disgust as I came down on something slimy on top of the spoons, shaking the thick coating of slime as Davin chuckled to himself. It had been covered in what felt like spit. I washed it, clearly feeling the presence of spoon licker's short appearance last night. A few of my ladles also bore the shiny skein of having been licked, but I doubted the little scamp got much more than dust off of them. Ulf often told me how horrible English cooking was, so I was careful not to make it worse by badly cleaned utensils. I cooked the bacon and eggs together, crisping them nicely as I added some of the hard bread I'd gotten from Sigrun yesterday. It soaked up the grease, and we ate our little meal before we headed to the market. I gave him a little money and told him we were going to buy some Christmas presents when we were here. He perked up, smiling as he took the roll of bills. Davin was excited by the idea of finally having someone to buy presents for, and the money to buy them with, and we had a morning of picking out gifts for Ulf, Arnar, and Sigrun. I picked up a few things for some of the other hands, and a few things for Davin, too. It was his first Christmas, and I wanted to make sure it was as memorable as possible. I also got him a very special gift for that night, something for my peace of mind as much as his. When I prepared to go that night, I gave him his early Christmas present and watched him grin from ear to ear. Now it's only for emergencies, and it won't make international calls if you were thinking about calling home. But it'll let you surf the web a little bit, and you can reach me in the sheep shed if there's an emergency. He smiled at me as he slid the new cell phone into his pocket. "Thanks. I promise not to abuse it." I ruffled his hair and grinned. I'll be close by if you need me," and looked down at Grendel, who was warming Davin's legs. He seemed to nod at me, letting me know that he would keep an eye out, and I nodded back before setting off for the sheep shed. I didn't like leaving Davin alone, not with the house so active lately, but I could hardly turn down the work, and Davin might have to get used to a certain amount of independence here. Ulf met me outside the shed, a lumpy package under his arm. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, handing me the bag. "You want your Da's cows protected, right?" He looked unsure. "The thing is, Friedy, no one has, to my knowledge, ever attacked one of the lads before. They're not like burglars or cow thieves. You can't turn them off with a warning shot. They're of the other world. Grendel ran 2 of them off last night. I don't see why a shot in the dark wouldn't do the same for this one." Ulf looked uncomfortable. "People who mess with the other world, the fairy world, never come out ahead. The lads take some, not usually this much, but some, and then they go. They leave us gifts for what they took, and we always have enough to give. Did you ask Da if this was okay?" I unzipped the bag and took out the hunting rifle and a little pouch of shells. It was nothing special, small bolt-action rifle, but they weren't large creatures we were talking about. I assumed that the bullets had trace amounts of iron in them, iron being historically poisonous to the creatures of Fae, so maybe it could work. If nothing else, it would dissuade them from coming back again, and save us a few nights of headache. "No, but he told me to guard the sheep and the cows. I'm just doing what he told me to do. Be very careful with that thing. You don't have a gun license, and if someone gets hurt, Da will be blamed." "I'll be careful. Get back inside before you freeze," I chuckled, throwing the bag over my shoulder. He shook his head. "Good hunting," and stomped back towards the longhouse. I settled myself near the door to the sheep shed and kept an eye on the cow shed. I would have preferred to nestle myself amongst the sheep, taking advantage of their collective warmth, but I needed a clear view to the shed so I could see the little bastard making his way in. I had the rifle across my lap, sipping the coffee I'd brought in the thermos, and waiting for my prey to arrive. Gertrude was nowhere to be seen tonight. Arnar had moved her into the house after the second lamb had gone missing, and now she would be spending the holiday inside. She was likely curled up with the cats by the fire, while I was freezing my bollocks off out here with the door open. The sheep had moved away a bit, not liking the cold, and I was left leaning against the wall by myself. The night seemed to stretch on forever as I sat with the cold wind keeping me awake. I checked my phone a few times to make sure Davin hadn't called, but the lads must have kept away tonight, because I never heard from him. The sheep bleated angrily a few times as the wind whistled in briskly, but I pulled my muffler up over my face and kept my vigil. Near 4 a.m., I heard the phone go off, and it roused me from a doze. It was Davin, and I fumbled my glove off so I could answer it. "Davin? Is everything all—" "You need to get back home. There's something in the kitchen." He was whispering, and I could hear Grendel hissing angrily. "Is Grendel with you?" "Yeah, he wants out real bad, though. I peeked, and I could see 4 of them out there." "4? Not 5. That's when I saw the shadow making his way across the yard. "I'll be there in a minute, Davin. I need to do something real quick." But I hung up on him. If I could hit this one, maybe the rest of them would leave on their own. By this point, the moon large and yellow, I could make out the pointed hat and the chunky sweater that they all seemed to wear. I would have worried that it was a child or something, if this weren't the middle of the night and near freezing conditions. I took aim, seeing the ugly little thing as I put him between my crosshairs. I could still remember his milk mustache, his lumpy face that grinned with no particular fear when caught, and led him a little as I prepared to fire. I'd gone shooting with Arnar and Ulf more than once, and it was a fair shot with the comfortable old rifle. Suddenly he stopped and turned to look directly at me. You would have said that was impossible. I was 50 feet away and nearly buried in a snowdrift. But he looked at me. Even across the distance, I could feel those hateful eyes as they bore into me. It froze me, just as it had that night in the cowshed. The look, though I couldn't have seen it, seemed to communicate easily his disdain for me. "What will you do, man-thing?" it seemed to challenge. "You have no power here. You cannot hope to stand against the lads. I bet you won't even pull that trigger." He started to move again, and though I felt as though my bones had turned to ice, I squeezed the trigger as I attempted to recapture my tenuous manhood. My shot cracked out across the silent yard, and I heard the sheep and cows raise a ruckus as their world was filled with sound. I was off at once, crunching through the snow and running to the spot where I'd seen the little imp fall. I didn't actually believe I had killed it. I didn't honestly think it could be killed, but I wanted to see if it had left anything behind. Some hair, maybe, or blood, or anything that would prove I'd actually hit it. When I came to the spot, I heard people raising a ruckus in the longhouse, and it seemed nearly as loud as the cows and the sheep had. When I got to the spot, I saw 3 things sitting in a divot that it had left in the snow. A long piece of red string, a small amount of blackish blood, and a potato. I picked up the potato, looking at the odd withered thing, when I started hearing footsteps crunching towards me. I turned the rifle, still in hand, to find Arnar and Ulf, as well as 3 of the farmhands coming towards me. Arnar sucked in a breath when he saw the potato, and I heard him say something guttural when he noticed the blood. Ulf looked at his father, shocked, but he too seemed to be unsettled by the old root in my hand. Arnar reached for the rifle. "Give me the gun, boy. I can't believe you have done this thing with my own weapon." I was speechless for a few seconds as he snatched the rifle from my shaking hand. "Done what? I saw him coming to hurt the cows. I stopped him." "You stopped nothing!" Arnar yelled. "You have only given him a more exclusive target. You have interrupted their holiday business, and now you will have to pay the price. I'm sorry, boy," he said, shaking his head and walking back towards the house. "What does that mean?" I asked him. But he only kept walking, the farmhands in tow. I looked at Ulf. "What does that mean?" Ulf shook his head. "It means you shouldn't have messed with the creatures of Fae. I told you it was a bad idea, Frady." The chill in my blood had nothing to do with the biting wind. Is he gonna send me away, Ulf?" Ulf shook his head. "He thinks of you as a son. He could never send you off, especially now that you have a mouth to feed. I think, though, that it might be best for you to take a few days off. Once the Yule lads are gone, you can come back to work. Till then, you might have your hands full. Too full for work, I should think." He tromped back to the house, leaving me in the snow to contemplate what I had done. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Happy holidays, and thank you for joining us for Night 5, but Chapter 4 of our Yule Lads stories. The Yule Lads' diaries are really starting to come together, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with how it goes from here on. Now that the OP has definitely angered the creatures of Fae, I would expect it to get a lot worse from here on out. Tonight's lad was Frostlicker, or Spoonlicker. Spoonlicker, as you might have guessed, licks spoons. I'm not 100% sure whether this is for some sort of nutritional reason, or whether he just likes licking spoons, but that is what he does, and he gets along well with a lot of the other lads who seem to like to lick things, or touch things, or take things. He's been known to take spoons and ladles as well, so he likes to take spoons and ladles sometimes as well, so it seems that he's not just about the licking, but also about the taking. You'll come to notice that the lads really seem to fall into 3 categories: stealing, annoying, or both. But, again, given who their mother and father are, you're probably lucky that that's all they get up to. So, I hope you'll join us tomorrow night for more Yule Lad stories, and if you're looking for some more spooky holiday fun, maybe head down to my holiday playlist. Tonight's recommendation is The Yule Cat, given the story content we're reading this evening. The Yule Cat and the Yule Lads kind of go hand in hand, so why wouldn't you want to read a story about a giant cat that attacks children who don't get new clothes for Christmas? No matter what you're doing this year, tree trimming, caroling, maybe committing a little bit of holiday homicide, I can't think of a better way to spend it than listening to one of my playlists. Or maybe you've got that hard-to-buy 4-person on your Christmas list who loves the horror community. Might I recommend my new book, Fall Frights and Winter Chills? You can find a link below. It's perfect for any horror lover on your Christmas list this year. If you like what we do here on the show, maybe consider supporting us on Patreon. Speaking of patrons, let's go ahead and thank our patrons. Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor. Thanks to Winters, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Martha, Mary Ann Schuler, Jennifer Damron, and Tyler Parker for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you too would like to support the show, then just come on down to Patreon. For just $5 a month, you can get your spooky a little earlier in the day and have your name read out at the end of every TikTok and every YouTube video that I do. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.